all about you. Well, of course, every class is about you, right? Because it's all about you, all about you. Okay, but at any rate, really, we're going to be talking about just one thing today, very simple thing. We're going to be talking about professional engineer licensing. Has anybody had a talk with you about this?
No, you're about to.
Well, but I haven't. I mean, I didn't know. Did your parents sit down with you and say, you know, son, daughter, there's a few things we should talk about? On that list of things is professional licensing. Well, so what is professional licensing?
What a band knows
I mean, isn't that why you go to college?
To take tests?
Well, yeah, so that you can get a professional license, right?
You can get a job.
You'd be like a doctor, right? You go into the doctor's office, you see on the wall, I went to whatever, board certified, whatever. Then I assume as an engineer you need the same thing, right? Because there's no possible way you could go out and practice the art of engineering without being licensed, is there?
It sure is.
Yes.
What? No way. Talk to me. In the back.
There's a lot of jobs in power that they require a PE. Then there's a lot of them that they don't even care and they want to know that you have experience.
Well, they can't make up their mind then. Well, so what are you going to do? How confusing for you.
Not really.
Get it, Jesse.
Man!
Get it and it looks
This is
better.
like those pesky ethics questions, right? Doesn't seem like there's a clear, cut and dry, do this type thing. Well, so let's talk about it today. Let's see if we can come up with it. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what professional licensing is. We'll try to have a balance, sort of understand. Ultimately, you need to make a decision. By the way, if you don't make a decision, it's the same thing as making a decision. You may not... there's a song in there somewhere, but I'll have to figure out what it is. But at any rate, maybe showing my age with that. Well, actually, two interesting things. First off, you're not my scariest class today. Ha, ha. Today happens to be Teacher in Service Day in Hillsborough County, which is where working parents come into the elementary schools and tell kids to don't do drugs, don't touch each other, and stay in school. So I will have the opportunity today to talk to a group of 3rd graders and 5th graders and convince them that they should forget all the other cool dads that show up with like uniforms and like utility belts and stuff like that. Policeman, fireman, and soldier, which are the 3 hot careers when you're in 3rd and 5th grade. And I will convince them to be an engineer, and I will be dressed like this, with no utility belt whatsoever.
Good luck.
Yeah, no, it's been a rough road so far, but we'll have to see how that one goes. Now, you've already drunk the Kool-Aid. I mean, goodness gracious, you're becoming an engineer, so whatever the heck somebody told you at some point in time, you bought that hook, line, and sinker. I'll try to be getting the next generation to come along. But maybe I'll tell them about professional licensing. That'd be sort of cool if you're in 3rd grade, right?
Don't get your lessons mixed up.
Okay. You may not understand exactly how powerful I am, but I'll tell you right now. So for the last 5 years, I've been the chairman of the Florida West Coast section of the IEEE. I've been the God Emperor of Professional Engineering Society. Now, I stepped down because we only let you do it for a little while. Go figure that. Power goes to your head or something like that. But at any rate, I have the ability to reach out to the 2,300 electrical engineers who are professionally working in the up and down the west coast of Florida. And just for you, I did that. I reached out to them and I said, listen, I've got this class.
I got your interaction.
Did you really? Oops, sorry about that. Reasonably bright class. I mean, we're not really writing home or anything like that. But they're thinking about becoming electrical engineers, and I have an opportunity to talk to them about getting your professional engineering license. I said, oh, working professionals of the Florida West Coast IEEE section, send me your stories. Is it worthwhile to become a licensed electrical engineer? And guess what? I got like 12 stories back. They're great stories, and I will be sharing them with you today. And so you guys get to hear what actual working professionals say and make up your mind as to whether or not it's something you want to pursue. Okay? Sound like a fair deal?
Yeah.
Take a look at what we got here. Oh, look at this! How cool is it? So what is a professional engineer? So basically a professional engineer, or a PE, as we like to refer to them as, is that they got a license, By the way, this is a license right here, and if that wasn't enough, you get a stamp. Okay? So yeah, I don't know, even with the stamp, you can go on boom, 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 Christmas cards and stuff like that, okay? Now, what's interesting is that you become licensed in a state. So, for example, if after you graduate, if you stay in the state of Florida, if you went ahead and became licensed, you would be licensed to be an engineer in Florida. That means you cannot go to Georgia and say, hey, I'm a professional engineer. You would have to get re-licensed in Georgia. Okay? So each state you'd have to get licensed in. So depending on what you're doing, if you're a contractor, if you go from state to state to state, you'd be picking it up. Generally, once you're licensed, it's pretty easy to get licensed in another state. Basically, some paperwork and paying some cash, and you're in like Flint. Okay? All right, story time. Woo! Story time. All right, so let's talk about it. So the first story that I have to share with you today comes from a gentleman by the name of Hearn Regan. What's that? Actually, the kids are all painted up, but you guys didn't get painted up, but whatever. I mean, come on. All right, so what does Hearn say? He tells me, I graduated at a time when Florida Power & Light encouraged their engineers to be licensed, so I went ahead and got my license. The first test of the value came when I was questioned as a witness in an electrocution case. Having a professional engineering license seemed to add a lot of credibility to my testimony, although I was not testifying at that time as an expert, but only as an employee of the utility. Later, as a consulting engineer, I had a number of assignments as an expert or as a member of an arbitration panel where a professional engineering license was necessary in order to establish my credibility. In one assignment, I was doing electrical and mechanical construction inspections all over the country for a string of housing for the elderly projects. I was to inspect for compliance with plans and specs. Having a professional engineering license was supposedly of no value because the architect took over and answered all the questions. On one occasion, I arrived at the job site where the local building inspector had just shut down all the construction due to code violations, and this was a huge problem. The violations were based on a local ordinance that prohibited the use of certain labor-saving materials, PVC conduit and armored cable, and processes that were allowed by the project plans and the specs. I was able to negotiate a satisfactory result that day with the building official and appeared at the city council meeting that night to revise the ordinance. At all times, I received direction and approval from the project architect by phone, but having the professional engineering license allowed me to make changes to the plans on the spot with verbal approval of the design engineers, and I was able to appear before the local government, which a non-professional engineer could not have. He goes on to say something interesting. I found this just actually to be quite interesting. The U.S. licensing process for engineers is considered to be the gold standard in the world. Every year, engineers in Canada, Korea, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Japan take the NCEES, which is basically the test, Fundamentals of Engineering and Professional Practice exams, just to be able to point to that credential when practicing engineering. These engineers are not licensed to practice in the U.S., but they value this credential just because it does not expire with time. So sort of an interesting thought there. Folks are coming from elsewhere to get certified in the U.S. So something to think about. All right. So a little history on becoming professional engineers. What's interesting is it all started out early 1900s out in Wyoming. Apparently what was going on is there's a whole bunch of people showing up and saying, hey, I'm an engineer. Now, 1907, Wyoming, they were still doing sort of expansion sort of stuff like that, a lot of mapping, probably a lot of civil engineers, or people proposing that they're civil engineers, and doing basically a lousy job of it. So Wyoming said, okay, stop, wait, looks like we need to come up with some sort of basic bar. If you're going to call yourself an engineer, you have to be able to be certified. So they put some rules in place. The American Association of Engineers, which later on went on to become the National Society of Professional Engineers, showed up. They really had one particular goal in mind. They wanted to get a professional engineering licensing framework put in place for all the states, and that was their ultimate goal. 1934, they renamed themselves to National Society of Professional Engineers. 28 states had it. 1940, I think they picked up additional 17 states. And 47, which would have been 2 years after World War II ended, Montana showed up as being like the last of the 48 states. 1950, we have them all, including Alaska, District of Columbia, et cetera, et cetera. And today, all U.S. states require people who are going to be professional engineers to be licensed. They all have licensing boards, National Council of Examiners. This organization attempts to make it consistent across the states, basic standards. But remember, every state gets to make up their own rules, gets to make up their own tests. Okay, so each one of them is just a little bit different. Story time. Fantastic. All right.
So what's different, like nowadays, why don't they guys take degrees to determine engineering?
Well, they sort of do, or we'll talk about that just a little bit. Okay, so a degree is a good start, but not quite enough.
So I understand, like in the past, when people just became an engineer, you can't prove to take a degree, but now you can.
Well, here's an interesting thing. A degree is not a degree. is not a degree. So in other words, I could set up the University of Jim, poof, University of Jim, and I could crank out an electrical engineering degree. If you come to University of Jim, within 1 week, I will give you a University of Jim electrical engineering degree.
We have solutions to that.
So you think somebody's gonna hire you for that? No, they're gonna hire somebody.
Well, why not?
The university's
It's not-
You graduated at the top of your class from the University of Jim.
But universities have to be accredited, and that will obviously be.
Okay, so now we're getting to the accreditation thing, right?
Yeah, but they're also gonna pick,
Okay.
they're gonna pick somebody from a better university or somebody like from their college. No offense.
You didn't go to University of Jim, so you didn't graduate top of your class University of Jim. So, yeah, so what you're really hitting on is the crux of the problem. Okay, so if you're an employer, you have a little bit of a challenge in trying to figure out the quality of the people who you could potentially either hire or do business with. Universities are all different. Okay, accreditation is good. Okay, I mean that sets like a baseline. But you'd really like to, when it comes to engineering, the question is how good of an engineer are you? You know, if you made it through college, that means you're good at doing classwork. Congratulations, fantastic. Are you a good
But
engineer?
if you pass the test, you're good at taking tests.
That's
I mean, it just kind of reflects your classwork.
but you see, there'll be a little bit more of a subtlety to this. So it's not like you take a test and become a professional engineer. It doesn't work that way. It's a little bit more complicated. But I appreciate your enthusiasm, because we'll get to that in just a moment, okay?
I'm just
So hold the question and we'll come back to it. Okay, good question. All right, so my second story for you comes from Richard Cherouz. Here's what Richard tells me. Jim, actually there's a world of learning in this one. I wish I'd taken my EIT, which is the first exam, when I was in school, but unfortunately I did not. I waited 16 years until I got a job at Disney, and they required me to get my professional engineering license. I took the review course sponsored by the FES, which is the Florida Engineering Society, at UCF for my EIT and for the professional engineering license. And I took the course for 6 months, every Monday night, for 3 hours a night. If it was not for that, I would have never passed them. You forget things like thermo and the other mechanical courses that you try to forget. And oh, by the way, I did a very good job of forgetting it. It took me 3 tries for both the EIT, which is part 1, and the PE, which is part 2, taking them back in 1988. It was a nightmare, but I finally passed them both the 3rd time around. Thank God I got them, because it's made a big difference in my salary and also my job opportunities. I'm now a licensed professional engineer in 15 states. And then he goes on to say, my company is looking for an EIT electrical, in other words, somebody who has passed their first exam, so that I can mentor them. We're looking for somebody who has a power background and maybe some instrumentation and PLC experience. If you know of anybody who I can mentor, because I want to retire in the next 3 years or so. But his company is looking for somebody who's made it through the first test. So just sort of an interesting point there. So you're going to hear this as a recurring theme. When you get out of school, you have an opportunity to take the first part of the test. A lot of people choose not to, move on. Later on in their career, they go, oh, I should get licensed. They come back to do it. Turns out it's really hard to remember all the stuff that's in your brain right now. Question?
One thing that kind of screws over engineers is that something like half of the exam we never learn because of being electricals.
Exactly, because it's an engineering license, right? It's not an electrical engineering one. It's got a lot of civil stuff on it, right? A lot of mechanical stuff, which is great if you're mechanical. Sort of lousy if you're electrical, right? It's a package deal, though. But you know, ultimately, you know, the profession of engineering, the problem-solving skills, it's all the same. So there's some formulas and stuff like that you need to memorize. But the cool thing about the whole test, multiple choice. All right, so let's take a look at professions. So you are planning on becoming an engineer. Fantastic. You decided not to become a lawyer or a doctor, much to your mother's sadness. Let's take a look at the difference between them. So doctors, they've got an oath. Lawyers are supposed to uphold a code of ethics. By the way, as an engineer, you're on the hook to hold up a code of ethics. We talked about that before. Remember the IEEE has a code of ethics. Doctors are involved in health issues. Obviously, lawyers are involved in legal issues. And you're involved with design issues. Everybody spends years studying, as you can attest to.
None of the University of Jim.
The University of Jim has an accelerated course for our brighter students, so we're able to get that through very quickly. State does it for medical, state does it for legal, and of course state also does it for engineers. Medical societies, legal societies, engineering societies, Here we go. Here's the little extra. We know that doctors can add MD to their name and they become licensed. Lawyers can add Esquire, and as a professional engineer, you can add PE to your name at the tail end. Just a little extra, a little something on the business card there. Okay, so why bother getting licensed? By the way, this is a Toyota Prius that somebody decided to put an off-market battery into, and they didn't quite connect it right, which meant that there was a little gap caused a little spark caused the whole car to torch itself.
Obviously, those are PE.
Yeah, it's
Fully mechanical.
increased complexity of systems. So basically, things are getting more and more complex, right? So people are becoming a little bit concerned about the products that they buy and the products that they use, because they want them to work correctly and they want them to be safe. That particular issue caused airline pilots to become extraordinarily concerned about transporting batteries on their airplanes, because they said, listen, if these things can spark, I'm not sure if I want to have it in the cargo hold on my plane, because it can cause really, really bad things to happen. Recognize professional stature, and knowing that you're going to live up to some ethical standards, that you know of ethical standards. That's sort of the key thing there. Also gives you membership in professional engineering societies and stuff like that. They're confident that you're continuing to stay up on top of your education because you've got additional certifications to do and stuff like that. Basically, it's sort of a stamp of quality. Ching, 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 ching. I know you got the degree from college. It's fantastic. Tell me what you've done since then. Why get a license? From the state's point of view, it protects them. They know that you've got a certain level of quality. Sets standards, provides mechanisms for measuring your career growth. You can't become a licensed engineer upon graduating from college. It's not possible. Time has to pass. You have to do some accomplishments. Determines what type of engineer you are. Also allows flexibility, transportability between states. Once you get certified in one state, you can go to another state and say, listen, I'm already certified. Let's talk about what I need to do to become a licensed engineer in your state. If you became a licensed engineer, what could you actually do? Well, it really comes down to three things. First off, you'll be allowed to perform engineering services for the public, and those are like those big public projects. You know, we're going to build a new courthouse building like that. We need a professional engineer to assist with the electrical part of that. Take responsibility for your designs, reports, professional opinions. This is huge, especially, for example, in court cases. You know, if they call for an expert witness, if they call for an expert engineer to testify, they're going to look for that engineer to be a licensed engineer, which just proves that you're not just some slob off the street that they're brought in to talk about what you feel. Instead, they want to make sure that you have some level of certification. And finally, allows you to fix your state-authorized engineering seal to your engineering work, which means that it's actually been approved by somebody who has some basic level of training. Okay? So all of a sudden you have, once again, a measure of quality. Who should be licensed? Okay, so, this is actually a question. If you're going to be doing any work for the state or the government, it's probably very important to be licensed, because they will put that down as a requirement. People who are supervising the design and construction of public works, people using the term engineer or professional engineer. If you want to advertise yourself as a professional engineer, guess what? You're going to have to get licensed. There's some actual legal issues around putting yourself out there as an engineer. By the way, anybody who goes out, pitches themselves as a professional engineer, and hasn't become licensed, you've got yourself some problems. You can be taken to court. You can be sued. You can find out that you've got a fairly expensive fee that you have to pay there. Why should you be licensed? Job requirements is probably number one. There are jobs out there that require you to have a professional engineering degree, right? Whether or not it'll be the first job out of school or the next job, who knows? They say that you're going to hold 12 jobs during your career. So who's to say whether it's job 1 or job 6, but probably one of them along the line will require it. Aids and promotion. You know, if I have a bunch of engineers working for me and there's a promotion and an advancement opportunity comes up, who am I going to select? Okay, if you're all doing really good work, fantastic, wonderful, but who am I really going to tap on the shoulder and say, okay, you're going to move up to the management or the supervisor area? If you got a professional engineering license, that does set you aside from all of your peers. It indicates a level of commitment. And then, of course, prestige. Okay, if you're out at a bar, well, you know how that goes, okay? Just, you can bring your certificate along and say, look, I'm a professional engineer. Is it worth it? Interesting question. So how long is your career going to last? 40 years. Have you done anything for 40 years in your life so far?
Nothing.
No, absolutely not. So who knows? Who can even conceive of how long 40 years is? That's like going to high school. That was very early. And actually, yeah, I guess it could actually. Okay. 40 years is like going to high school 10 times. That seemed like a really long time. I mean, it seems like a long time to me, but that's just my thinking on that one. Okay, stuff happens during 40 years. The world as you retire is going to be completely different than the world that you entered originally in your career. You cannot anticipate what's going to happen. Only licensed professionals can work on specific projects. Well, it'd be nice today if you could work on any project. And by the way, this particular path can make you higher wages, better career opportunities. You know that story that we heard about, so the guy wanted to work for Disney, and Disney had required that he be a professional engineer. Disney is a pretty cool company to work for. Okay, if you'd like to work for them, and all it takes is show up and say that you're a professional engineer. At least that gets you in the door, right? Gets you above all the other folks. So that's something to think about there. Professional license. So where did this concept of a professional license come from? It's really something that was created by 3 separate groups. The first, obviously, is education, and ABET is the folks who do the actual certification of your engineering programs. Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. The government wanted some sort of measure of quality for their engineers, and of course, industry had the same need. So these 3 came together and said, let's come up with a way to certify or create professional engineers. Okay? Why do states actually end up doing the licensing? Well, basically, once again, they want to make sure that their state projects work out. And they also want to make a legally recognized credential. Basically, something that if you have somebody show up with it, it's a license. It's a license to practice the art of being an engineer effectively. It's also a great revenue source if you're a state. Woohoo! Legal requirements. All states have registration laws, so if you want to be an engineer, that's what you have to do. If you're not a professional engineer, what can't you do? Well, you can't advertise that you're a professional engineer. You can't advertise that you're an engineer if you don't have a license, okay? You can't practice or offer to practice as an engineer. So if there's a contract that comes out that says we're looking for a professional engineer to do this, you can't actually really respond to it and say, I can do that if you're not a licensed professional engineer. And there's some funky exceptions for industrial practice. But gist of it is that it's sort of an you're in or you're out type of thing. Engineering Practice Act, okay, so this is some legislation that was passed. This is all part of the licensing. If you become licensed, you agree to protect the public, be objective, be confident. You promise. Maintain the confidentiality of clients and act in a responsible manner. Establishes, it's all sort of ethical guidelines, and this one actually pulled out of the Texas Board of Professional Engineers, but there's an equivalent in every single state. Every state has a state board. The board is the one who actually grants the licenses to people who ask for it. Regulates practice of engineering in the state and makes and enforces to deal with license and compliance issues. If there's any problems with you as a professional engineer, you will be hauled before the board of professional engineers, and they will make a judgment as to whether or not you get to keep your professional engineering license. Licensing board consists of, and once again, every state's a little bit different, but this particular example is 9 members. They're all professional engineers, free from the general public. They get about 6 years to do it. They meet 4 times a year to consider people who are actually applying for it, and they don't get paid for it. So basically, the thought on that is that they're not going to be motivated to do anything squirrely. Engineering restrictions. Okay, professional engineer is a very powerful phrase. You can only use the word professional engineer to describe yourself if you have a professional engineering license. Okay? 27 states go so far as to say engineer. Okay? So there's a little subtlety to that. So how you present yourself to the world can have a big impact on whether or not you're licensed. Story time? All right. What do we got here? Let's see, this comes from Don Rummerschreiner. I've always been very shy and not very worldly, so most of my years at the University of Cincinnati I was constantly overwhelmed. However, my grades were actually pretty good, so when they described being a professional engineer and taking the test, I had no idea what they were talking about, but I took it anyway. I did barely pass with a score in the 70s. Since then, work experience has always been in instrumental and industrial controls and never required a professional engineering license. With about 6 years of experience under my belt, I decided to take the final PE exam and become registered. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I bought some books on taking the PE exam and realized the important thing was to prove that you knew how to work and solve problems. Back then, the exams were all handwritten, and it was important to show your work and explain why you were doing what you did. Surprisingly, for that exam date, I received the highest score, tied with somebody else, in the state of Ohio. To date, I've never needed the professional engineering registration. However, the company at which I currently work does get a substantial discount on their liability insurance because I am a professional engineer. So they readily pay for the continuing education and the PE license renewal. So that was actually sort of an interesting one. Although he's never actually had a job that required professional engineering, it turns out because he is professional engineering, his company gets a benefit from it. So something to take into consideration. So how do you actually become a professional engineer? Okay, so here you go. You have to complete 2 or more years of an accredited engineering program at an ABET school. Okay, you have to complete 4 years of engineering work after graduation. Okay, and then after that, you need a bunch of references. And there's 2 tests involved. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Process for licensing, 2-phase process. Every state's actually a little bit different. If you've graduated, then you can actually go ahead and take the fundamentals of engineering, or as they refer to it as the FE exam. So that's the first exam, and that's the exam that you take right after you graduate. Okay? Then what happens is you go ahead and you do 4 years of work. Okay? Basically, you go to high school, as we like to say. Okay? Once you're done with those 4 years of work, you can come back and take the second part, which is the professional engineer or the PE exam. Okay? Once you pass that, then you can become licensed in the state that you're working. Question?
Is it possible, is it possible to go and work for, let's say, you work for 7 years, then you took the FE and the PE back?
It is. And a great question. Yeah, so if for whatever reason you didn't take it right out of school, you went on, after you get the years of experience under your belt, you can actually take both exams and then become licensed. Okay?
It's just easier to do the FE first.
It's really hard if you do it that way. And actually one of our stories pointed that out. And the reason is because the FE tests all the stuff that you should have in your brain when you graduate, right? It's because you just had those courses. If you let time go on, all that stuff just slips away, right? So you'll effectively have to go back and restudy everything. Admittedly, you may not be up on some of the civil stuff and the mechanical stuff. There's, that's new stuff you have to add in there. But you've seen all this stuff, you're used to studying, you're used to taking tests right now. So the FE is really designed to be taken after school. But yes, you can take it at any time. Okay. So here's a flow chart. We love flow charts. Here's how you do it. All right, so get your degree, take the FE exam. You're then considered to be an EIT or an engineer in training. Okay? Work for 4 years. Take the PE exam, and poof, you're a professional engineer. Okay? It's really that simple. Admittedly, you can also play with this timeline if you want. So why did you go to USF? Here you go, guys. Finally, we're going to tell you exactly why you decided to go here as opposed to what? ITT or some other place like that, right? If you went to a technology school, you take the FE exam, you do 4 years of work to become EIT. Then there'd be like another 4 years of work, then you take the PE exam, and then you become a professional engineer. It would take a lot longer. But because you're going to a high quality school and paying top dollar to go there, you get to get it taken care of a lot quicker. If you wanted to shortcut the whole thing, good news, go to grad school, woohoo! And then you can sort of take it a lot quicker. I think there's only 3 years of work if you end up doing that. Okay? Are there any questions about the process? Question back.
The PE exams, when you talk about it's a state thing, is it the 4 years work so you can take that PE? Does it make a difference in states? As in, is there another state that will do 2 years worth of work and you can become a professional?
Actually, a very good question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm under the impression that they're all pretty much the same. Okay, they're all going to shoot for a period of time. I think it's pretty much 4 years. Remember we talked about that organization that tries to standardize it across all the states and mixed results on that. But I'm unaware of any states that have anything less than 4 years.
What if you take the FE in one state, work 4 years in another state, and can you take PE in from state you worked in, or how does it work if you change states?
And that is a state-by-state thing. I understand what you're saying. So in other words, say, hey, look, I already did this. You know, give me credit for it. I believe that that is possible. Okay, but it's going to be a state-by-state type of thing. So you just have to look into it.
What about engineering work experience while you're in school, like internships, things like that? Does that count towards the 4 years of work at all?
I don't believe so because I think the clock starts once you start taking. Well, actually, I'm going to take that back because that's not quite true because you can take the FE and the PE at the same time. I haven't read anything about that. So yeah, I think what it is you need to show up with paperwork that proves that you have the work experience because that's how they certify that you have it. So if you get the paperwork that says yes, you have the full 4 years, then that'd be fine. In theory, I think if you work during school, something like that, you were going to school and you were working. So yeah, you get credit for it, but obviously it's not full time. So it's going to be a delicate balance on that one. It's a shot to find out though. Right?
It might be you have to work under a PE license if you're going to use internship.
That's a good question. Yeah, I didn't see anything that said that you actually had to do, you know, traditionally, like right here. Here you don't necessarily have to work under somebody who's PE license, right? You know, but it's that it could be. You have to double check on that. Okay, good question though. Okay, key elements of the, and here we go, key elements of experience. It must demonstrate use of engineering knowledge, education, etc. So if you worked as a hairdresser for 4 years, first off, congratulations, it's a worthy field and stuff like that, but that's not going to count towards the 4 years of experience in either. Okay? It must be progressive and of increasing standard of quality and responsibility. They want to see that you're moving along in your career. You know, if you came in as a lab tech and then 4 years later you're still a lab tech, they're not really seeing the progression that they're looking for there. Should have obtained while working under supervision of a licensed engineer. So this is a tricky one. You know, obviously they'd love it if you're working under a PE, but I don't believe that that's a hard and fast requirement because there's just not a lot of professional engineers out there. Okay? Acceptable experience, design experience, they love that. Okay, analysis experience, that's great also. So clearly you have to explain to them what you spent those 4 years doing. Okay, that's okay, so this is your professionally licensed engineer career. Okay, so once again, this is where you're at right now, getting the degree. The fundamentals exam is potentially what's coming up. If you fail, you just keep taking it. You know, there's no shame or anything like that. You just take it till you pass it. You become that EIT, engineering training, work for 4 years, take the professional engineering exam, you become a licensed professional engineer. Then, of course, there's courses that you have to take. You have to continuing education credits, right? Once you're a licensed engineer, you need to keep that certification. The way you do that is you prove to them that you've taken continuing education over the course of a year. That's pretty standard stuff. If you ever stop doing that, then all of a sudden you become inactive. That's called retirement or death. Okay.
Do you know what the pay delta is between PEs and non-PEs?
I'm very pleased to bring up. I have a fantastic bar graph that I believe will answer that question.
Right.
When I present the bar graph, let me know if it answers the question. If it doesn't, we can do some research on it. Okay. A little drum roll there, right? Now we got some excitement going on. Okay. Story time. All right. Our next story comes to us from Harold Frank. So he says, I graduated in 1970 with a BSEE after obtaining an MSEE. I became registered in 1974. At that time, I did not realize the importance of registration. However, I soon began consulting while teaching electrical engineering at the West Virginia Institute of Technology. My consulting work evolved from design into forensics as I was asked to help folks with cases. By 1990, I retired from teaching and began doing forensic engineering work full-time. My work takes me all over North America and affords an opportunity to travel and see this great country. I have offices in West Virginia and Florida. I run the Florida office and my son runs the West Virginia office. He has both a BSCE and an MSME. He's also registered. Although many areas in engineering do not require registration, I'm a firm believer in it. Registration sets the engineer apart from those who are not registered. I liken engineering registration to the difference in lawyers that pass the board exams and those who do not, or doctors who are board certified and those who are not. Dun, 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 dun. And he goes on and says, hey, listen, if you got to pick an engineer, wouldn't you rather pick a licensed engineer? So that's good stuff. Here's to your point, just a little bit. There's a couple different rules here. I think it's comity versus reciprocity. How many of you saying, listen, if you get the status of an engineer who's licensed in another state, other states accept that? Okay, whether or not they do checks and stuff like that. Reciprocity is agreement between two states to accept licensing from the other ones. And it's an agreement-based type of deal. And they all have something there. And I think it's actually getting better over time as they sort of try to standardize it. So once again, this is a state-by-state licensing. If you get licensed in one state and you go to do work, or if you move to another state, not a problem whatsoever, you need to go through some paperwork and file to become licensed in that state. International engineers, if anybody really cares, 36 states accept degrees earned at foreign universities and meeting the same requirements. And once again, they accept the degree, so that means you still have to take the test. Okay, and then 40 states agree to this accord that says, listen, the accreditation process is going to be equivalent. So there's some unification here, but we still, each one of those states still wants the foreign engineers to become certified in their state. First off, they'll know that they have the skill level, and also they'll get the cash for actually taking the test. NCES, I'm going to go through this rather quickly. These are the guys who are sort of like the governing overall organization. Once again, it's done state by state, but these guys provide the input to the state boards and give guidance on how to do stuff. So this is just sort of stuff. Once again, they maintain records of everything like that. Licenses, oh, okay, this is a good one. License versus certification. So, when you move out into the big world, there are certifications all over the place. Our good friends at Cisco make millions, literally millions of dollars off of their certification program, all right? But it's not the same thing, okay? Businesses, professional organizations have certification programs, Cisco, Microsoft, all that sort of stuff like that. These are great, these are wonderful, and they may or may not help you on your career, but they are not the same thing as becoming a professional engineer. Okay, those are technology certifications. It's not the same thing as becoming a licensed professional engineer. Both need education, each results in the award of a credential, and both provide procedures for disciplining basically the problems. If you cause problems, they can take it away and stuff like that. But once again, a certificate is not the same thing as a license. A license allows you to do some very specific things. A certificate is just awarded to you by a technology company or somebody who's come up with that particular program. Voluntary license is a privilege. That's all good stuff. National license, because that would be really handy. I'm a U.S. nationally licensed professional engineer. Not going to happen anytime soon. Okay. Once again, there's a lot of money behind this stuff, so each one of those states are motivated to have their own programs. What's an accredited degree? Good news, you're well on your way to getting an accredited degree. The ABET guys are the folks who show up and they approve the program that is offered by the university. USF does an excellent job of making sure that their electrical engineering program hits all the key points. So when the ABET guys show up, and I think they show up every 3 years, check out the program, give it a thumbs up, hopefully, and then you continue to get a certified degree. Oops, all right. So what's, let's see. When I graduated, who is this? This is Anne Ferraro Clement. When I graduated from college months ago, we were encouraged to take the EIT, now the FE part, but it was not required. A nearby university had taken the test, not necessarily passing it, as a graduation for requirements. Anyway, I took it. Didn't do a lot of additional studying since I was in my final semester of college, and I failed it with an oh-so-close 69%. I decided, heck, I can do better than that, so I took study courses, highly recommended, and took it again within a year or so, and got another oh-so-close 69%. So I said to myself, oh, screw it, and I moved on. I worked for large companies, automotive, and was not in construction, so a professional engineering license was not a requirement. In fact, it wasn't really even a necessity. Hardly anyone had a PE, and it didn't really bring any money in the old paycheck. And it was commonly known at the time, once you were direct with a large automotive company, you were golden. Work until you retire, or if you like leaving, no worries. The world changed. As we've all seen, automotive, along with many other big industries, took a major hit, partly self-induced, partly economically induced. So here I am, halfway through my working life, and I find myself signing up to take the FE exam. I've been out of college for 20 years. I've not done a derivative or an integral by hand in at least that long. Bode plot, I only recognize the name. Fourier transforms, did them way back when V equals IR and F equals MA, but after that, I have rules of thumb and discussions with the team working on the project. We have computer simulations and specialists that project out the theory to those of us who need to apply it every day. Technology in the working world is such that you need to be able to recognize a wrong answer. You do not need to be able to derive the correct answer by hand. And I'm not an abnormality when I say I was a senior in college. I never envisioned a career that I actually had. In fact, I didn't know the things that I've done even existed back then. I've morphed to do a mix of mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. I actually got rid of my engineering books about 10 years ago, and I had not opened them even longer than that. The FE changes over time. The test that you take today is not the one that you will see in 20 years. It will be different with subjects that you had never studied. Did you know that they added environmental engineering as a subject matter? By the way, it is on the test. When did that happen? And I can no longer take my books in, my notes. I have to use their layout of formulas and a new calculator. No programmable HP 28S. That's a pretty old one. And why am I going to take it again after all these years? Well, now I work for an engineering company with 10 people. Yes, 10. Very small company. A spin-off company. The sister company has a PE or two spread out among 5 locations and a couple of hundred people. The new company, my company, has no professional engineers. Since I was signing up to take it, I mentioned it during my interview and was greeted with, "That's great, we need a professional engineer," and none of the other engineers are signing up to take it. I wish I'd stuck with trying to take the EIT way back when until I passed it. Pursuing just the second half of the PE itself instead of both halves, FE and PE, would be much less daunting. And that assumes that I have not taken the PE since I didn't need it, but hindsight is 20/20. So the trick with that particular one is, once again, what you hear is that if you put off taking the test, if you decide you want to take the test, that's fine. But if you go through life, you may encounter a situation in which all of a sudden it's a fairly important test to take, and you're going to find yourself in a bit of a bind, because all of a sudden you're going to be asked to take a test that has a bunch of stuff that you've long since forgotten. All right. The test. So let's talk about the professional engineering test itself. Right now, if you take it coming out of school, oh, I'm sorry, question?
Yeah, question. If we kind of expect that, I don't know, in 10 years after you take this exam, you forget everything that's on the exam, and that's when you're really, doing your job, what's the point of taking the exam? I mean, I'm signed up for it.
Woo! All right, so really remember, so it's not the test, but it's really 2 separate tests, right? So the fundamentals is designed to provide a baseline that says, listen, at this point in time, you know this stuff. Click, okay? And then the professional engineering part is designed to build on top of that. It says more of I've worked for 4 years and I've learned these things, and so now I can apply them like this. Admittedly, we all move on, right? And you say, well, look, I'm going to forget a lot of stuff over time. We understand that. There's no problems with that whatsoever. But as you forget things, because you're working professionally, you're also going to be learning a lot of new stuff. Okay? All this exam is going to say is at this point in time, you knew this material. Okay? Ultimately, if you needed to know it again, I would have confidence that you could come back and learn it and come back up to speed. Okay? If you don't have a professional license, I don't have any confidence whatsoever that you ever knew that material. You might come to me and say, look, I passed a class in college in which that material was covered. That's cool, but then I have to understand what college you went to, what class you took, and whether or not your professor was any good when you actually passed it. All right? Question?
Is the professional engineering at the second half, it's tailored to your specific field, I would assume?
See, I don't think it is, but hang on, stay with me for a minute here, okay? Because we're going to get to that in just a second. So let's take a peek at it. Once again, it covers a broad array of topics. So there's not, for example, an electrical engineering PE test. So hang on. A lot of people pass it when they take it right out of school. If you wait 2 years, you can see that there's a dramatic decrease in the number of people who pass it. Hint. All right. So what are we talking about? So we're talking about 2 tests. The fundamental test is broken up into 2 parts. Pardon me. 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, full day. Okay. Morning is 120 multiple choice questions worth 1 point each. The afternoon is 60 multiple choice questions worth 2 points each. Multiple choice. Come on, you can do multiple choice, right? I mean, the answer's right there in front of you. You just have to circle the right one. Can't be that hard. So here's what it looks like. The morning session. Chemistry, computers, dynamics, electrical circuits, woohoo! Engineering, economics, and ethics. Okay? As you keep going, fluid mechanics, material science, mathematics, mechanics, stats, and environment. Is that sort of like your entire college career plus a little bit?
Plus 70% of
Perhaps a review course would be important.
But
Remember, they're not going to test you on everything that you would learn if you were going to become a chemical engineer. They're only going to get you high points. Okay? So it's actually not all that hard to study for this. There's a fair number of topic areas.
So we don't have to study for the electrical part because it's going to be easy for us, right?
For you, this should be a walk in the park. That frees you up to study the rest. But you also had, for like, on mechanics, you know what this is going to be, right? This is going to be statics and dynamics, right? It's got to be.
We don't take that.
We don't take that.
No way! That's the easiest degree in the world.
And it's 17 years old.
Welcome to the world of statics and dynamics. Yeah, okay. So, once again, you know,
We don't take thermal.
we don't think they're
Basically, it's just fluids, economics, and
No.
physics.
We have economics.
How about computers? All right, so a review class might be, well, okay, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the afternoon session. That was just the morning. Let's go in the afternoon. Computers and numerical methods, construction management, environmental engineering. Remember, we talked about this being on there. It's 10% too. That's a little steep. Hydraulics, legal and professional aspects, soil mechanics and foundations. Can you hear the civils?
I think that's for not
That's for
Second part of the session you field.
Oh, is that true? Okay, I apologize. Maybe you guys have some information that I need to look into here. Okay.
I just wrote about it, the second part is all electrical, and then when you take the PE, it's all electrical.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. I'm dealing with a little bit of faulty information. So let's go back. So the fundamentals.
The fundamentals, the first part is.
The morning sessions?
Multidisciplinary,
Okay, so morning
And
session
then
is
the afternoon session is field specific.
And you can choose the general too if you want to take
Yeah.
the
You
general.
take the general.
You can take the general?
That's not recommended for like.
Well, I apologize. It looks like I have some faulty information here. I'll have to look into this and do a little better. Okay, that's cool. All right, so we're saying in the morning it's general. So you got your cross-disciplinary, everything you've ever learned. Then we're saying in the afternoon it's going to be electrical.
Field specific.
Field specific, and then the PE part of it
The
also.
PE is all field specific.
All field specific. Okay, that makes actually a great deal of sense. I apologize, guys. It looks like I got it by wires crossed with some civil engineering.
Well, you can choose to take.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, well that's cool. All right, so thank God. But it sounds also like there'll probably be a great deal of power on that, a lot of like antenna theory, a lot, so it's going to be across the board sort of stuff. All right. By the way, there's a gentleman by Dr. Ralph Thayer, who's actually associated with Polytech these days, who is sort of like the god when it comes to professional engineering certification and taking the test and doing well and stuff like that. So there's a local resource that can be very, very valuable in helping you acquire the information that you need to successfully pass the test. So just as a heads up. As you said, breath exam. Yeah, actually, this actually looks like this is probably close. I think I got this one actually, guys. All right. Additional information on it, IEEEUSA.org or NCESS.org. Either one of those places can probably give you good information on it. So this is actually pretty kosher. 4 modules, 40 questions. Oh, this is the PE exam. I'm sorry, that's what we're talking about. So congratulations. Let's say you passed the foundations, you went out, had a big drink, that was fantastic. 4 years later, you show up, you're taking the PE example. 4 modules, 40 questions. You got on the breath module, all academic must work all questions on 1 depth module of their choice, which I believe in your case would be electrical engineering. You're going to work a total of 80 multiple choice A, B, C, D questions. Once again, multiple choice. How hard could that be? Just put C down for all. No. Story time. I think I'm out of stories, so I think I went through all my stories. Is that my last one? Yes. But hopefully you got from the stories, the whole gist of those stories was, it was a whole bunch of people who had, when you get out of school, you have a choice, whether or not you take the test or not. It's completely cool, it's your call, okay? From the stories, hopefully what you picked up on is there's a bunch of people who decided not to take it, went on. Later in their career, they encountered a situation which all of a sudden becoming a licensed engineer was an important part of what they had to do. And what you see is that they then had to put a ton of effort into passing both the foundations and the professional engineering one. In all honesty, the PE test, 4 years into your career, you could study and pass, right? I mean, because it's electrical engineering stuff, you're pretty comfortable with that stuff. It's the foundations that's going to get you, because of the breadth, if nothing else, right? So, interesting decisions that you have there. 10 reasons to become a licensed PE. There's more than that. 4 categories: legal necessity, better job opportunities. Ooh, we love that. Better opportunities to get promoted, and personal satisfaction. The promotion one, interestingly enough, locally, Tampa is a big power engineering town, right? We've got TECO, we've got Seminole Electric, we've got Progress, we've got Lakeland. I mean, that's just 4 right here. In the power industry, they're all bent out of shape about professional engineering certification. They really like it. Because the guys running the show are professional engineers, right? So they look for that among people who come. All right. If you ever want to become a consulting engineer, and in other words, be self-employed, you need to be a licensed engineer. Okay? If they're going to select you, because you're going to be producing, designs and recommendations, they want to make sure that you're licensed. Only PE can sign and seal engineering documents that are submitted from public authorities. So if you're going to work on public projects, docks or bridges or anything like that, the electrical part of that, you need to be a professional engineer. Restructuring, downsizing, all this sort of stuff happens. PE makes you different, makes you stand out. It's not a magic shield. It's not necessarily going to protect you, but it's going to put you in a much better place, right? Pretty much everybody needs to have it. Continuing education. Once again, that continuing education thing that we've talked about in the past is actually very important. Just by having a professional engineering license, you'll show people that you are continuing your education. It's sort of proof, right? So if you've had your license and if you've had it for a while, they know that you must be taking the continuing education credits. Some companies actually pay a bonus for being a professional engineer. Remember, gosh, how generous of the company. That's very kind of them. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. If you are a professional engineer, there's a good chance that they're getting a discount on some sort of, probably insurance. Liability insurance is probably the number one. And they're willing to share that with you. If you want to teach, if you ever consider becoming an electrical engineering professor, having a professional engineering license will make you stand out from all the other people who would like to become an electrical engineering professor. In many industries, CP is required for specific jobs. We already talked about that. International, that's a good point. So if you go to work in another country, which there's a very good chance that you will at some point in time in your career, it's at least a stamp of quality so they know what they're getting. Okay, and mark of a professional. Okay? So it's a high bar. It's not easy to become an engineer, as you well know. A lot of math, a lot of science, a lot of things you have to do, a lot of college you have to go through. Congratulations. With a little luck, you'll actually make it. Now, just becoming an engineer, coming out of school, that's great. It's hard to become a licensed engineer. But once again, it's a challenge that if you meet it, you will have accomplished something very significant. Boop. Hey, look, it's the bar graph we talked about. How exciting. We're building up to this. All right. So these numbers might be a little bit off, but they're, I think, relatively, they're correct. Okay, so engineer and training is there. Not licensed, it looks like you're going up to about, 50 or so. Professional engineer, you're popping up to about 60. Environmental and forensic, that seems to be, those are the guys who get hauled into court, right? So what you're seeing there is that there is a value to actually becoming a licensed engineer. Question?
What is the difference between the EIT and the non-licensed?
Okay, so
passing the EIT?
EIT is engineer in training. And effectively what it means is that you passed the FE test, but you have not yet taken the CE, the professional engineer test. You are not a licensed engineer at this point in time, but you're halfway there. Does that answer the question?
Okay, and what is not licensed?
What's not licensed?
Not licensed is, I think that's years of experience without ever having a thing. So remember, let us assume that this means it's an engineer within their first 4 years of their career. Okay, that would be the assumption on this one. This would be sort of an engineer at any point in time in their career, okay, who decided to go the non-licensed route. That distinguish between those two? There's not that. So, this is somebody who's on their way to becoming licensed.
Is it still true that electrical engineers make a little more than other engineers?
You know, it's interesting. Traditionally, yeah, but every year that goes back and forth. Some years it really pays to be a chemical engineer. Okay, those are years in which, for example, oil prices are high. Okay, or they've had a lot of discoveries. Okay, traditionally electrical engineers do better than most of the other engineering professions. Primarily, the reason is because there's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of stuff being made that require the electrical engineering skills. Remember, if it doesn't work out in electrical engineering, you can always be a computer programmer, right?
Or a mix between both.
That's exactly right. You know, once again, I used up all my stories. I have to go back and recount my stories, but you get the gist of that one. Future comes, are you ready? So, here's the takeaway from our discussion today, hopefully that you'll leave with. So, you have no idea what the future holds, nor do I, unfortunately. There we go. When you graduate, you have an interesting decision to make. The question is should you go through the time, energy, and effort of taking the fundamentals of engineering, the FE exam? Okay? The question is who knows? What a pain in the butt. Do you have to study and pay for and take that test? But I guess hopefully the message you'll take away from our discussion today is that there's a chance that it may help your career later on down the road to become a certified professional engineer. Can't call it, who knows? But you have a window of opportunity after you graduate that you could probably take the FE exam and it would just be another exam to you. Do some studying, take it, pass it, and you're done with it. All you got to do is get a 70 or better and you're good to go, right? It seems like that would almost be an insurance policy. You may never take the PE exam 4 years down the road. You might not remember, oh, hey, yeah, whatever, right? But if you got the FE taken care of, and later on you decided that, hey, becoming a licensed engineer was important because you went out on your own, you started your own consulting business, whatever you chose to do, then taking the PE part wouldn't be that big for you either, right? Because it's 4 years, it's just electrical engineering stuff. You could knock that out with just a little bit of study. If you have to take both parts, 10, 15, 20 years later, that's going to be a bear. Okay, it's going to be a real challenge because you've forgotten all that stuff. You have to go back and remember everything that's in your brain right now. So it's your call on what you want to do. What would my recommendation be? My recommendation would be, hey, look, graduate, have a nice graduation party, woohoo! Go out and figure out when the FE exam is going to be given. Take a review course, because it sounds like there's a lot of stuff on that test that you may or may not have had as part of your undergraduate, but you have the ability to learn it all without any problems. Take the FE part, pass the FE part, and then go on. Okay? 4 years out, reevaluate what you want to do. Figure out if it's worthwhile to take the PE part and then make your decision. Question?
You actually have to sign up to take the exam like 7 months, 8 months beforehand.
Is it really that far out?
For the one in April, I had to sign up before like October or something like that. And that's April to or October to April.
Have you taken any sort of training classes for it?
No.
Or are you just going to go in cold? And
Pretty much.
You buy a book or?
On mine.
So you've wasted your 7 months, have you now? Well, that's just, I guess the night before, all right. So that's cool, and I appreciate, and that's a very good point because there's a lead time. They don't offer it every weekend, do they?
Yeah. No, it's twice a year.
Twice a year that it gets
April
off.
and October.
Excellent, that's fantastic.
So that's the only 2 times they get it.
It seems like you sort of need to have a plan here,
Yeah.
right? So you need to, and I appreciate that that's a key piece of information. Seems like you need to sign up for it. Also, it seems like you might want to take a review course, which it seems like you'd have enough runway to actually take it. You prefer to do this once, right? So one of the stories of this person took it, what, like 3 times? Dear God in heaven. That's horrible. Yes, question?
Isn't it limit chances to take the exam? Like, I think 3 times to take the exam, pass it, right?
I had not heard that. They'll take your money. Thank you very much. I don't think there's a problem with that.
I think there is a time constraint. If you fail it 2 or 3 times, you gotta wait a certain amount of time.
So they build in a delay into the actual system?
Yeah.
Okay. I can check on that. That's
So you keep forgetting more information than you take your money.
that would be a little bit, in the back, down question.
There's a guy in one of my classes, he's from, I think he's from Europe somewhere, and he's doing that, and he said if you fail 3 times, then they make you take 10 credit hours of college level engineering courses. So he's just taking any random courses in the electrical engineering.
Has he failed it 3 times?
Yes, and that's why he's in the classes.
So that would be actually, so your classes are what, like 3 credits? So if you gotta take 10 credits, that's like 3 classes in a lab or something like that, right? Okay, all right. So once again, it goes back to the concept of a review course would actually probably be fairly important. And plus, And I apologize, I probably should have researched. The test isn't necessarily a cheap test to take.
It's $150.
150 bucks? Damn, alright, so that's, that's a fancy Kindle or something like that. So you prefer to take it once, be done with it, and pass it and stuff like that. Cool, alright, that was the information we wanted to cover today. You have the information now, you need to make a decision. Once again, if you do nothing, you will have made a decision. But remember, we're really lousy predictors of the future, okay? And so if you want to keep your options open, if you want to have the insurance, this is definitely something that you should probably look into. Okay, pretty easy to do. You can go online. Our friend Mr. Google is there for us. If you do Florida and you do professional engineer, you'll go right to the website that tells you exactly what you have to do in the state of Florida. All right, now that's it for today. Folks, on Tuesday of next week, Tuesday's the only day that we meet next week. I'm going to give you Thursday off.
You're so kind.
Feeling generous, feeling generous. On Tuesday, we're going to review for the final. We will not have class on Thursday. And then the following Tuesday, come early, come off, and bring a sharpened number 2 pencil because it's going to be the final exam. Okay? On Thursday of, not next week, but the following week, Thursday, which will be the day after the final exam, I will be doing an in-class project. I will be assigning points to it. If you come, if you do the project, you get the points. If you do not come, you do not do the project, you do not get the points. And when I'm working on the final grades, I go, oh, you almost made it, but you did not show up for the final Thursday, so thus you do not get the grade that you were hoping to get. So whatever, you make the call. Are there any questions about our timeline going forward?
No.
I can tell you your grade now, but that's always spooky when I do that. All right, you're out of here. Have a great weekend.